I'm Elizabeth Cotton, and I'm the author of UberTherapy, The New Business of Mental Health, and I'm a writer and educator in the field of mental health at work. So in the book UberTherapy, I argue that this uberization process and the emergence of these large-scale digital models of therapy are problematic. So this is a crossover book. I tried to use kind of quite ordinary and emotional language to think about these hardcore industrial shifts that are taking place in the background of therapy. So digitalization, datafication, platformization, and appification. And I asked the question, what's the impact on both parties in the therapeutic relationship of this shift in the way that we do therapy? And I argue in a quite a dystopian way, it makes the possibility of real therapy, what we can imagine as real therapy, quite remote in every sense of that word. We did a survey as part of the Digital Therapy Project, which I run with UK and US researchers and practitioners, psychotherapists and trades unionists. Last year, 500 UK, 500 US therapists. And we asked them about their experiences of using digital technologies, platforms, working for the big online therapy platforms that everybody is aware of now, but also the algorithmic management systems that exist. And what's something that became very clear in practitioners' experiences of working through these platforms is that it has fundamentally changed the nature of the work, the nature of the expectations, and the relationship between clients and therapists. And one of the things I talk about it as retail therapy within the book is that it's created a very different type of relationship between the new consumers of digital therapy and therapists. So there is much more attention to the idea of convenience. So being able to see a therapist at any point in any time, being able to swipe and move on from therapists that you don't like, or you don't feel that you get a selection of therapists, and the short-term nature often of the interaction. And so the question that I ask in the book is, it might be more convenient, certainly might be cheaper, for example, than private medical insurance, but at what cost? So what are we losing as a result of this model? And one of the things that I argue in the book is that the digitalization of therapy can act as a defense. It can act as a barrier to us thinking, doing the deep and often painful work of therapy, and also the real work of working through difficult issues. So in the book, I talk about this idea of therapeutic Tinder. So again, it's a provocation to help try and think about the implications for therapy and therapists of working through these digital systems. And one of the characteristics of the large online therapy platforms is about having access to very large numbers of therapists, being able to select therapists, and also to be able to swipe. So being able, if it's not working, move on to another therapist. And there is, in the book, I argue that this can be used as a digital defense against dependency. So I argue that the nature of the technology and the proposition of have therapy anytime, anywhere, from anybody, what it tries to do is act as a defense against dependency, which is often a very painful but important part of the therapeutic process, that you form a relationship, who you sort of know. In therapeutic language, we call it an intimate stranger, someone that knows you intensely on some level, but who you may not know where they live or anything about them really. But to be able to feel safe enough to let your defenses down and to let another person see you and to contain, to hold whatever material you bring to that session. And that creates a certain type of relationship, hopefully a relationship of trust and safety, but also dependency. So allowing yourself to need the help of another person, this particular person. And I would argue that the technology sort of shifts us and nudges us away from having to be in touch with sometimes a very uncomfortable relationship of dependency. I think also that there's issues around the use of smartphones, but also the visual nature of meeting people online. I argue that for many of us accessing therapy, there may be issues around trauma, around pain, and there's always issues around shame. So it's very difficult for us, for everybody, to be able to be open and not self-conscious about what is really on their minds. And I would argue that there's a really delicate balance with using these technologies, not to enlist and to enact shame and self-harm with these technologies. One of the consequences of being able to ghost your therapist, which is consistently made available to you through the use of online therapy platforms, is that it allows us to shift the problem of therapy from how do I do this deep work of developing a relationship with a therapist who I trust and feel able to reveal the parts of myself that are very difficult to talk about, into one of how do I connect with 30,000 therapists online. There is an invitation in the UberTherapy business model to shift the problem to the issue of connecting to a therapist, having therapy at any time given by anyone, quickly, short term, solution-focused therapy, rather than the more complex and difficult problem of relating to another human being in a way that is safe enough for you to really say what's on your mind. I think one of the concerns about the use of AI technologies without another person being in something different from therapy. In the book, I argue that other people are not a waste of time, in the sense that it's hard to imagine finding safety with a chat GPT sufficient for you to really look at deep and work through deep personal issues. Most of us don't go to therapy because we're doing fine. Most of us go to therapy because there are problems that we really can't solve for ourselves. Much of that material is unconscious. Much of it requires a safe, experienced, empathic human being to hold the information that we need to look at. I think therapy, the hardest things to think about in therapy are often money, sex, and death, loss. These are huge issues that we find very difficult to process and to understand about ourselves. And often we experience feelings of intense shame and embarrassment. So the invitation to just say what's on your mind, it's a lot harder than it looks. And in order for us to do that safely and be given the opportunity to work things through, we need to be in the presence of another person in an actual relationship with them. And there's something about the challenge of therapy, is that part of the role of a therapist is to be different from you and not just say the things that you want to hear, whereas AI technologies are designed precisely for that purpose. So I think at best, the use of AI chatbots as a therapeutic process can be superficially okay. But I think for people who hold trauma or shame, it can be extremely damaging and leave you more alone than you were before the use of these technologies. So I'd say that the risks are often misunderstood, underestimated, and not well publicized. But I think over time, there already is in the States the banning of chatbots for young people. There's a huge concern around the link between social media and mental health. So I think as consumers of digital tools, and including digital therapy, we hold an important place in the regulation of digital therapy, and over time we will start to see the emergence of digital therapy kite marks. We will start to see consumer group actions being taken against mental health chatbots. So we'll start to see the emergence of consumer power around what counts as a safe digital AI tool in the field of mental health.